Although I am no stranger to the world of broadcast media and have a 6 years of expertise in television production, this subject taught me something new. As I'm passionate about behind the scenes media production, so I'm looking forward to this introduction to broadcast media course. Even though I was used to working in newsroom in my home country Pakistan and interacting with journalists as a reporter, I was still afraid of being in front of camera. I used to help other team members with news stories, news packets, and advertisements, but it was hard for me to be on the receiving end because I was not very good with the camera. Over the 12 weeks of this module, I grew as a journalist, stepped outside my comfort zone, and learned many other perspectives on a career in media, particularly reporting. My final portfolio included podcast, TV news package, and live TV news, and portfolio guidelines are set out by the Ofcom broadcasting regulations. All three of the above elements will help me emphasize gender equality, diversity, and inclusion in the materials I choose for my presentations. My stories and topics are relevant to my target audience and highlight current events that I think my audience will find interesting and educational. For package, I first choose to do a piece on Sheffield mass cycling April 2024 edition set in a city since it offered a variety of interesting and difficult possibilities. I conducted a lot of research before to the ride to learn about the Sheffield mass cycle ride's background, importance, and anticipated attendance. I got to the start line early on the day of the event to paragraph the excitement and expectation among the assembled riders. I used a mix of film footage and interviews to capture the vibe of the event, the diversity of participants, and the beautiful sights around Sheffield. Richard and Tammy were potential interview candidates because of their participation in the trip. I had prepared a series of open ended questions to invite everyone to express their thoughts on the event as well as their experience and source of inspiration. During the occasion, I presented myself as a student journalist documenting the ride to Tammy and Richard among the attendees. I said that I wanted to interview them for the news package and asked for their permission to do so. Throughout the interviews, I kept asking questions and made an effort to comprehend Tammy's and Richard's point of view. I encouraged them to speak up and express themselves by offering them sporting gestures and vocal cues to let them know I valued their thoughts.
It's to advocate for safer cycling routes so people can use active
You can
travel.
tell me more about
So at the moment, you've got certain places in Sheffield where you've got to ride on very busy, dangerous roads.
Just bring a bike, bring yourself, say hi, come and cycle with us.
Okay, thank you very Their much. Stories gave the news program greater depth, realism, and human interest, which increased its appeal to a wide audience. One challenge I encountered was planning the logistics of filming the journey while biking. Because the rider was spread out, it was necessary to create a well-planned strategy and target key points in order to ensure complete coverage. It was necessary to create a well planned strategy and target key points in order to ensure complete coverage. After the event, I carefully went through all of the filming and interviews to find the most interesting moments and concepts. I organized the film chronologically to create a cohesive story that followed the viewers from the beginning to end. I concentrated on improving the tale by including visuals such as the aerial shots of bikers navigating metropolitan streets and close up pictures of participants' response. Overall, covering the Sheffield Mass Cycle Ride April 2024 edition was an enjoyable and challenging experience for me as a student journalist. I was able to overcome obstacles by carefully planning, adapting, and being innovative, resulting in a captivating broadcast news broadcast that captured the event's excitement and enthusiasm. For podcast, as a normal person, I don't like hearing my own voice. This is my first time making a podcast. When I first conceived the idea for the podcast, I was drawn to the idea of exploring the unique challenges and trips international students encounter while studying abroad. I conducted extensive research to understand the demographics of international students, their motivation for studying abroad, and common issues they face. This research phase helped me identify potential interviews and topics to cover in a podcast. I invited overseas students from my network to join the podcast. I created the interview questions that address their personal experience with cooperation, overcoming school difficulties, and adjustment. Before we started recording, I emphasized the importance of interviews, telling their story honestly and making them feel comfortable and welcome. Ali's experience highlights the struggle and triumphs of international students that they face. His narrative focuses on overcoming linguistic challenges, accumulating to academic expectations, and overcoming the first culture shock that comes with the moving to a foreign nation. Adil's perspective helps us to look at the international student experience from different angle. Adil provides useful advice based on his experience study abroad, highlighting the importance of developing support system and seeking opportunities to immerse yourself in the culture of the country. His advice on participating in extracurricular activities and building a sense of community in college resonated with the listeners who were planning their own studies. The presence of Adil and Ali voices in the podcast offered listeners with a variety of viewpoints on what it is like to be an international student, while also providing diversity on the narrative. Their stories made the difficulties experienced by the overseas students more understandable, while also emphasizing the determination and adaptation required to succeed in unfamiliar surroundings. As a student journalist, incorporating these personal stories taught me the value of elevating marginalized voices and promoting mutual respect among audience. I let the interviews to speak freely during the podcast session by paying close attention to their stories, all the while influencing the conversation to cover the essential topics. I recorded many takes to ensure that everything was clear and unified. Throughout the production phase, I carefully edited the audio to remove any pauses and unwanted noise, ensuring a clean flow. I used background music and sound effects to improve the podcast mood and attract listeners. I structured the podcast into various segments, each segment focusing on a different aspect of life as an international student, like diversity, difficulties, motivation, and planning. Each of these parts covered a variety of topics, including social integration, academic challenge, cultural adaptation, and personal development. In order to fully understand the issue, I carefully mixed the narratives, research data, and experts from the interviews to each episode. After finishing the initial editing, I extensively reviewed the entire podcast to ensure incoherence and consistency. I concentrated the timeline, transitions, and the sound effects between the segments and overall the story flow. I also asked suggestions from the mentors and fellow students to acquire a diverse perspective and suggest area of progress. Once completed, I formatted the podcast for distribution on multiple platforms such as streaming services and social media network. Producing the podcast about international students' perspective was very rewarding experience since it allowed me to highlight the marginalized voices while also building empathy and understanding in listeners. Throughout the process, I gained valuable insights to the challenges of studying abroad as well as the preservance of international students in unfamiliar environment. I also honed my skills in narration, interviewing, and audio production. While recording the podcast, I was mindful of Section 4 of Ofcom broadcasting guidelines for live news story. The first live news I saw a Facebook post about the Palestine emergency rally in Leeds. So I contacted the organizers to schedule an interview and they were honored to have me cover the event. All was okay until later after the event when I was watching the film and realized that there was so much music in the background. Greg and Nick were interviewed during the live broadcast, which gave us a lot of insights into why they are at event and what they thought about the current situation. Their passionate defense of Palestine rights and demands for swift action touched an emotional connection with viewers, highlighting how serious situation is. Their unique perspectives and life stories gave the talk substance and honest, which inspired compassion and understanding in the audience. Interviews with Ize and Taliana presented more perspective on the Palestine emergency rally.
This is an emergency rally for Rafah as Israel has started the invasion into Rafah.
So, who is organizing this rally?
It was originally a vigil organised by Palestine Solidarity Group, but it's turned into an emergency rally.
Is a remark about the conflict's impact on Palestine communities as well as Taliana insights into the importance of international cooperation, emphasized the rally's global significance about human rights.
Thank you. How
Who
are
is
you?
organizing this event?
So this is mainly students, and this is the student encampment, and we're doing an emergency protest because of the attack on Rafah.
So, what's the purpose of tonight's rally?
We are calling for a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire, for the brutal attack that's happening in Gaza and in Palestine and in Rafah at the moment.
Their diverse perspectives contributed to a greater awareness of the issue at the end. As a student journalist covering the Palestine emergency rally demonstrated the need of being present at major social and political environments. It demonstrated journalism's potential to amplify underrepresented voices, raise awareness of urgent issues. It demonstrated journalism potential to amplify underrepresented voices, raise awareness of urgent issues, and spark debate and understanding. Moving forward, we must continue to advocate for balanced and knowledgeable coverage of conflicts and solidarity march while uploading journalistic standard of truth, accuracy, and fairness. Thank you very much.